The scene that broke my family wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, sterile, and took place in a soundproofed conference room at the U.S. Department of State. My sister, Chloe, a bubbly and popular social media influencer who had spent her life as the center of our universe, sat weeping across a polished mahogany table. Her face was haggard, stripped of its usual curated perfection. My parents sat beside her, looking aged and lost. They pleaded with a severe man in a tailored suit, a man I knew as Deputy Director Marks. "We've been to every police station," Chloe cried, her voice cracking. "Please, just tell us if she's alive." Director Marks looked at her, his expression an unreadable mask of professional detachment. He didn't offer comfort or sympathy, he offered only procedure. "Ma'am," he began, his voice cutting through the room like cold steel, "your sister's operational status is classified. Furthermore, 12 months ago she invoked Protocol 7, officially redesignating her next of kin away from this family, citing you specifically as a primary security vulnerability. It all started a year earlier, under a perfect blue sky in my parents' backyard. The air was thick with the smell of grilled steak and the faint scent of chlorine from the pool. It was a typical family barbecue, which meant it was a stage for Chloe's latest triumphs. I had made a tentative attempt to talk about a complex data mapping project I'd just completed for my boring government job. Chloe cut me off with a tinkling laugh, turning to our captive audience of relatives. It was the same way she'd cut me off when I'd tried to talk about my college thesis, or the promotion I'd been so proud of. Another entry in a long, silent list. "Honestly, Anna is so quiet," she announced to the table, waving her hand dismissively. "If you went missing, we'd probably move on like nothing happened." A ripple of laughter went through the family. My father chuckled, my mother smiled weakly, that familiar, tired expression that always chose peace over fairness. They saw it as a harmless joke, another little jab at the quiet, invisible daughter. But inside my head, something clicked into place with chilling finality. It wasn't an insult. It was a data point confirming a long-held hypothesis. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply let a calm stillness settle over me, the same calm I felt before a mission. I slowly raised my glass of iced tea, the condensation cold against my fingers, and met my sister's smiling eyes. In a voice just loud enough for her to hear over the chatter, I murmured 2 words. "Try me." That night, long after the laughter had faded and the house was dark, I moved with a silence they never knew I possessed. I packed a single, well-worn duffel bag, my go bag, always ready. I didn't take photos or keepsakes. I left my house key on the gleaming kitchen counter, a final, quiet statement. Then I walked out the door and never looked back. They all laughed, thinking it was just another casual cruelty at my expense. They had no idea it was a professional challenge, and that I was about to accept the terms. To understand the federal-level reckoning that followed, you have to understand that my job is making people disappear. To my family, my life was a monochrome photograph, flat, quiet, and utterly unremarkable. They had a nickname for me, one they used with a kind of affectionate pity. They called me the ghost because I was the one who faded into the background, the silent observer in a house that orbited a blazing sun. And that sun was my sister, Chloe. I remember one Christmas dinner, the scent of pine and roast beef filling the air, the entire evening a coronation for her latest achievement. She had hit 1 million followers on her lifestyle channel, a milestone my parents treated with the reverence of a moon landing. They unveiled her gift in the driveway, a brand new, gleaming white SUV complete with a giant red bow. As everyone cheered, I didn't just see a car. I saw the 20 years of money is tight whenever I needed new glasses. I saw the second-hand laptop I had to buy for college because my father said a new one was too much of an extravagance. I saw every music lesson I was never offered, every school trip I was told we couldn't. To Ford, all of it materialized in that single, shiny moment of Chloe's triumph. Later that evening, I tried to share a piece of my own news. "I received a commendation from the department," I said quietly, "for archival data integrity." My father, a retired mid-level manager who worshipped at the altar of tangible success, just patted my head without looking at me. "That's nice, sweetie," he said, his eyes already scanning the room for Chloe. "Just keep that steady government paycheck coming." The ghost had spoken, and no one had heard a thing. But there was another world, a world they couldn't even begin to imagine. In that world, I wasn't a ghost. I was a legend. My name wasn't Anna, it was Echo. My office wasn't a dusty archive, but a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, a place so secure it technically didn't exist. It was a cold, dark room, the only light coming from a wall of monitors displaying encrypted communications and satellite feeds from halfway across the world. The only sound was the low hum of classified servers and the blood pounding in my ears. One night, while my family was probably watching a Christmas movie, I was guiding a high-value asset, a terrified scientist, through a hostile border checkpoint in Eastern Europe. My voice was the only thing keeping him alive, a calm, steady presence in his encrypted earpiece. "Maintain your pace, Doctor," I murmured, my eyes locked on the drone feed. "Do not break eye contact with the guard. His name is Gregor. We know he has a daughter named Anya." The tension in the skiff was a physical thing, a weight in the air. "Your papers are flagged for a level 3 inspection. That's expected. The override code is filtering into their system now. You have 90 seconds before the window closes." On the screen, I watched the guard wave him through. A collective silent breath was released in the room. My superior, Deputy Director Marks, stood behind me. His trust in my abilities absolute. He placed a hand on my shoulder for a brief second, a gesture of immense respect in our world. "Good work, Echo," he said, his voice low. "You just averted a major international incident. In that room, I wasn't invisible. I was essential." When I got home late that night, the house was quiet except for my mother, Linda, a woman who believed family peace was a treasure to be protected at any cost, even if the cost was me. She was waiting for me in the kitchen, her face etched with a familiar, gentle disappointment. "Anna," she began, twisting a dish towel in her hands, "you need to be more supportive of Chloe. Her life is so stressful, being in the public eye. All those comments, the pressure to be perfect. It's a lot." I just stood there, the adrenaline from the exfiltration still humming under my skin, my mind still replaying the life-or-death calculus of the last few hours. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for me to understand a world I had no part in. "Your job is so safe, so quiet," she finished softly. "You don't understand the pressure she's under." And in that moment, the two worlds collided with devastating clarity. The chasm between the person they thought I was and the person I actually was had become an impassable canyon. Her words didn't even hurt anymore, they were just data. Information that confirmed the necessity of my next move. She saw a quiet archivist who needed to be a better sister to a celebrity. She had no idea she was talking to a woman who had just saved a man's life from 1,000 miles away with nothing but her voice. She thought my world was small and safe. She couldn't comprehend that my silence wasn't weakness, it was a weapon. It was professional discipline. I just nodded, letting her believe she had gotten through to me, the quiet daughter who always understood. For years I'd let them believe I was the ghost, a harmless, invisible presence in their lives. But in my world, being a ghost is a qualification. It was time to stop playing by their rules and start enforcing my own. After the barbecue, I drove back to my small, sterile apartment, a place that looked more like a long-term hotel room than a home. There were no pictures on the walls, no sentimental clutter on the shelves. It was a space designed for efficiency, for a life that could be packed into a single bag at a moment's notice. As I shut the door, I didn't feel the sting of my sister's words. There was no anger, no wave of sadness, no tears. What I felt was something much quieter and far more dangerous. Clarity. It was the cold, clean click of a puzzle piece sliding into its final place. This wasn't about running away from a family that didn't see me. This was about deploying on my next assignment, Operation Penumbra, a long-duration mission that required absolute radio silence and zero civilian footprint. Chloe's casual cruelty and my family's easy laughter had just proven one final critical thing. They weren't just a source of emotional neglect anymore. They were a security risk. Their unpredictability, their obsession with public perception, their complete lack of discretion. They were a liability my mission and my country could not afford. My decision was made before I even took off my shoes. I sat at my desk and opened my government-issued encrypted laptop. Its startup screen was a blank gray field asking for a 17-digit passcode. I navigated through layers of security to a secure internal portal for the Diplomatic Security Service, a place only a handful of people had access to. I found the form I was looking for. Asset Isolation Request, Protocol 7. It was a directive rarely used, reserved for operatives going so deep undercover that their personal connections had to be administratively and legally severed. The form asked for a justification. My fingers moved deliberately across the keyboard as I typed, family members, demonstrate poor information discipline and emotional volatility, pose a predictable vector for compromise through public and social media channels. The protocol required senior officer approval. I initiated a secure video call. A moment later, the unreadable face of Deputy Director Marks appeared on my screen. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've read your request, Echo," he said, his eyes scanning something off-screen. He looked back at me, his gaze intense. "Penumbra is a full comms blackout for 18 months. Invoking Protocol 7 is permanent for the duration. Are you certain?" I met his gaze without flinching, my voice as steady as my hands. "They issued the challenge, sir. I'm just accepting the terms. They are a liability I can no longer afford." Marks held my gaze for a long moment, and then he nodded once. "Understood," he said. "The request is authorized. Your civilian identity will be placed on administrative hold. Go dark in 6 hours." The system was designed to protect assets from foreign threats, but that night, I used it to protect myself from a domestic one. They wanted me to disappear. I was about to give them exactly what they asked for. A year of searching had led them here, to this moment. They walked into that sterile conference room at the State Department believing they were on the verge of a breakthrough, a tearful reunion with the quiet, fragile daughter they had so carelessly lost. A year of hiring private investigators, of filing endless missing persons reports, of Chloe posting tearful, dramatic videos. To her millions of followers, a campaign that generated so much digital noise it began tripping our internal security filters. They thought their persistence had finally forced the hand of a stubborn bureaucracy. They had no idea they hadn't forced a meeting, they had been summoned. They weren't concerned family members being granted an audience. They were a security threat being brought to heel. They sat across the polished table from Deputy Director Marks, looking worn and frayed in a way I'd never seen them. The curated perfection of their lives had been eroded by a year of genuine, confused panic. They expected sympathy. They expected answers. What they got was the cold, hard reality of a world they didn't know existed. Director Marks began without preamble, his voice devoid of any warmth. "For the last 12 months, he stated, his hands steepled on the table, your actions have repeatedly interfered with a matter of national security." My father scoffed, a sound of pure, indignant disbelief. "What are you talking about? Our daughter is missing." It was the last time he would speak with such confidence. Marks ignored him completely, as if he were a buzzing fly in the room. He gestured to a large monitor on the wall, which flickered to life, displaying a document so heavily redacted it was almost entirely black. A few words were visible at the top. "Jensen, Anna. Operational file. Your daughter?" Marks continued, his voice cutting through my father's indignation, "is Special Agent Anna Jensen, an operative within the Diplomatic Security Service. Her work, which is highly classified, involves the exfiltration and protection of high-value assets from hostile environments. For the past year, she has been on a deep cover assignment. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum where all their preconceived notions about me went to die." My father's mouth hung slightly open. My mother just stared, her eyes wide and blank. It was Chloe who finally broke the spell, her voice a mixture of confusion and her old familiar condescension. "Special Agent? That's ridiculous. She's an archivist," she insisted, as if she were correcting a foolish mistake. Director Marks slowly turned his head and fixed her with an icy stare that could have frozen fire. "Her cover is an archivist," he corrected, letting the word hang in the air. "Her operational call sign is Echo. 12 months ago she was deployed on Operation Penumbra, a long-duration mission critical to the interests of this country. And before leaving, she invoked Protocol 7, which legally and administratively severs her connection to you for the duration of her mission." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he delivered the final, devastating blow. She cited a conversation at a family barbecue as the final piece of evidence, that her relationship with you was a direct threat to operational security. The color drained from Chloe's face. I can only imagine the memory hitting her like a physical impact, the sun, the smell of steak, her own voice, dripping with casual cruelty. saying those fateful words. My parents looked between Marks and their daughter, the bewildering narrative finally snapping into a horrifyingly clear picture. Their quiet daughter, the ghost, was a ghost for a reason. It was her job. And they, with their laughter and dismissal, had failed the most important test of their lives without ever knowing they were being graded. Marks wasn't finished. Your public social media campaigns and the hiring of private investigators nearly compromised her position and the safety of the asset she was protecting on 3 separate occasions, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. You are here today not to be helped, but to be warned. Any further attempts to locate her, publicize her name, or interfere in any way will be treated as a federal offense. He stood up, the authority in the room coalescing around him. For the remainder of her deployment, the State Department is her legal next of kin. You are not her family anymore. You are a neutralized security risk. He looked down at their stunned, shattered faces for a moment. This meeting is over. My sister built her life on being seen. In that silent room, she was finally forced to see the truth, the ghost she never paid attention to was the most important person in the room. I wasn't in that room, of course. My mission was thousands of miles away, in a place of dust and whispered conversations. But I learned what happened later, in a sterile debriefing room, from Director Marks himself. He described how diplomatic security agents, trained in de-escalation and quiet authority, politely but firmly escorted my family from the building. There was no shouting, no final dramatic plea. They were simply silent, stunned into a state beyond argument. He told me they were left on the sidewalk in downtown Washington, D.C., looking utterly adrift as the city's indifferent. Traffic flowed around them. 3 people who had just discovered the map of their world was a complete fabrication. Inside, Director Marks returned to his office, the global satellite map glowing on his monitor. He typed a single, secure message into a heavily encrypted channel. A message I would receive hours later. It simply read, Echo, the domestic interference has been handled. Maintain radio silence. Marks out. And just like that, the family that had defined and dismissed me my entire life was reduced to a piece of resolved operational interference. 6 months later, Operation Penumbra was complete. The world had shifted on its axis. I didn't return to my old apartment, to the ghost of a life I had so thoroughly abandoned. My new home was a secure training facility in Quantico, a place that smelled of discipline and freshly cut grass. Here, I wasn't the quiet, invisible daughter. I was Agent Jensen. I was Echo. I moved across the training grounds with an earned confidence, a quiet authority. That was reflected in the eyes of the new recruits I was tasked with leading. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and deep respect, because in our world, your legacy wasn't. It's something you inherited. It was something you built in silence and survived to tell the tale. My colleagues were my family now, a unit forged not by blood but by shared risk and mutual competence. Our conversations were about strategy and ballistics, not social media followers and brand deals. The quiet respect I received from them was worth more than 1,000 of my family's hollow celebrations. This was a world where my silence was understood not as weakness, but as the mark of a professional. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. One crisp autumn afternoon, while I was observing a training exercise, an aide approached me. He held out a tablet, his expression neutral. Ma'am, this came through the General State Department inquiry inbox. The director thought you should see it. On the screen was a forwarded email, a block of text that felt like a message from a different lifetime. It was from Chloe. My breath caught for only a second before a calm professionalism took over. The message was short, stripped of her usual flair. Anna, it began, I am so sorry. For everything. We get it now. We were wrong. Please, just let us know you're safe. I read the words over and over. This was it. The apology. The validation I had once craved with a desperate hidden hunger. The proof that they finally understood. It was everything the invisible child in me had ever wanted to hear. But the invisible child was gone. I stood there on the training field, the shouts of recruits and the crisp autumn air swirling around me. I felt no anger. I felt no triumphant satisfaction, no urge to write back and detail the years of quiet pain. I didn't even feel forgiveness. What I felt was a profound and unshakable peace, the kind of peace that comes when you realize a wound has finally truly healed over, leaving behind nothing but smooth, unremarkable skin. Their apology was a key to a door I had already walked away from and locked from the other side. My peace was no longer dependent on their acknowledgement. My legacy was here, with these recruits, in the mission we served. With a calm, steady hand, I tapped the archive button on the screen. The message vanished. I handed the tablet back to the aide, my focus already returning to the exercise in front of me, to the world where I belonged. My sister once told me that if I disappeared, no one would care. She was wrong. The right people always cared. If you've ever had to leave a toxic environment to find where you truly belong, share your story below. In this community, your mission is always recognized.